Hi everyone, and thank you for taking the time to review my presentation. Today I'm talking about business planning in tourism, and fundamentally we're talking about where is your business going and how do we develop a plan around that you can communicate to the key stakeholders that need to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. My name's Rob Cameron. I'm a business advisor, coach and consultant. I work with a firm called Collins SBA, and our mission is to empower business owners to have the clarity, confidence and control to live their best life. The agenda I'm going to work through today, really three things. The first one is why have a business plan? Why is it important? Secondly, I'm going to talk about what your business plan needs to cover. And thirdly, how to really get the most out of your business plan and make it work for you. So, why have a business plan? A lot of work goes into business planning, and often it can sit on a shelf if you don't make the most of it. So why go to that effort? And what the research tells us is there's a couple of very good reasons to spend some time doing some business planning. The first thing is, chances are your business will grow faster with a business plan. Research I looked at recently indicated on average, businesses with a business plan will grow 30% faster than businesses without. Secondly, with a business plan, it's far easier to access funding. I'd almost go as far as to say you won't be able to access funding unless you've got a business plan. Thirdly, if you've got a business plan, chances are you're far more likely to actually take action and do the things that are on your plan. And fourthly, whilst there's no guarantees in life, there is more chance your business will succeed and not fail if you've got a business plan. And again, this is backed up by research, so well worth considering having a business plan. Having a business plan is going to depend a lot on who the business plan is for. And typically, there are around three groups that you're preparing your business plan for. The first reason I often see people come to me looking for help in developing a business plan is they're needing to get funding from banks. Most banks will want to see a business plan before they'll lend any substantial amount of money to a business. Secondly, you may be looking to have some equity invested into your business from an investor. Again, it's very rare to be able to get equity investment into your business unless you've got a business plan. The third audience that you may be putting your business plan together for, and arguably the most important, is actually for yourself as a business owner or operator. Potentially it's for a board, but it's there to keep you on track and make sure you've thought through carefully where you're going and what you need to do to get you there. The next question is, what do you actually need to have in a business plan? So fundamentally, a business plan is about working out where you're going and then explaining how you're going to get there. So, what does it need to cover? Firstly, you need to be really clear on the logic as to how your business is going to make money. Secondly, you need to have some sort of evidence explaining the facts behind the logic that you're using. Thirdly, it's really clear the steps you need to take in terms of actioning your business plan. And fourthly, that you've thought a little bit about the risks that your business might encounter. So it doesn't matter who the business plan is for, but those four things need to be covered in some way in your business plan. So let's touch on those in order. The first one, crystal clear business logic. What are we looking for there? Firstly, you really need to explain your product or service. What is it and what makes it special and unique? Secondly, who is the target audience? Who is this service really targeted at? Then, how is the offer going to come together in a way that attracts your target audience to the product or service that you're bringing together? And importantly, we have to consider the price point at which you're offering it, and is that still going to be attractive to the target audience that you're looking at? And the next thing we need to consider is how we're going to communicate the benefits of the product or service that we're offering with the target audience. So that communication piece is getting more and more important. The other important thing that we like to see in a good quality business plan is why. Why are you doing this? Why is it important to the customers that you're targeting? Why is it useful to the investors or the banks? And why are you doing it for yourself? What's in it for you? So if you can explain all those elements, we start to get a picture as to the business logic in terms of how this business is going to work. The next section of the business plan is usually the supporting evidence. And typically I would break this into three areas, being the numbers, the assets, and the team. So what do I mean by the numbers? There's really two sorts of numbers that I look for in a business plan. The first is market research. Do you actually understand the target customers that you're aiming for? And are you understanding the trends that are going on in the industry? Ideally, this is backed up by some sort of credible research. And an example I've put up here is some research from Tourism Tasmania, who have some great facts and statistics about tourists that come into the state and how they spend their money when they're here. The second set of numbers that's equally as important is the financials. So what are the numbers that are going to make your business work? Typically, I like to see some sort of reference to the fundamental activity drivers that underpin the financial logic. So an example might be your revenue of 1.5 million is going to be made up of 3,000 customers a year spending $500 each on average. That begins to give me a sense as to how this business is going to come together and what's driving its success or failure. Another example for an accommodation business might be how many rooms you've got available, what sort of occupancy level you're going to be aiming for, and what's the average nightly rate. So the example I've put together here, 10 rooms at 70% occupancy average, averaging $150 per stay per night, gives us a total of $383,000 in income. So understanding those basic numbers is really the starting point of providing some evidence and logic that your plan is going to work. The second lot of evidence we need to look at is, do you have the assets that you need to make this plan work? So the assets could be the financial resources you need. It could be property, plant, equipment. What sort of assets do you need in that regard to make your plan work? Or it could be intellectual evidence that you've got together that shows that you've got the skills and capabilities to make this plan work. An example recently was a tourism operator that was telling me their key asset was their deep understanding of their target market in an overseas geography. Whilst that sounds very intangible, it is actually a really important part of making his business work. And the logic came together really clearly in that regard. Which brings me to the last aspect of the evidence you need to provide in a business plan, which is around the team. Do you have the right people around you, both internally in the business, whether that be employees, or the right advisors to help keep you on track and provide you with good advice? The next important part for a business plan is the action plan. The action plan is really pretty simple. What needs to be done, who's going to do it, and when is it going to get done by? This is obviously a really important part, particularly if you're putting together the business plan to keep yourself on track. But equally, banks or investors are going to want to see some sort of credible plan as to how you're going to actually pull all this together and what actions need to be taken by when. The other important thing that you're going to need to consider when you're putting your business plan together is what are the key risks. Again, this doesn't have to be complicated, but just some level of thought needs to go into what could go wrong here, how likely is it it's going to go wrong, and what could we do about it? One example I see is marketing projections that can often be fairly, shall we say, optimistic. So a risk I often suggest we have a look at is what if our marketing doesn't achieve the conversion rate we're saying it's going to in this plan? How likely is that? Perhaps there's a medium chance that it's not quite as successful as we want. So what would we do about it if that happened? And if we were to reduce some of our expenditure by not perhaps increasing casual employees' hours as we'd planned to, our financial numbers are still going to work. So something as simple as that just adds credibility to your plan that you've thought about what could potentially go wrong here and how we can work around it. Usually there's 5 or 6 key risks that can undermine a business plan's logic, and showing that you've thought about it and thought about ways to get around it can be really helpful in adding credibility to your plan. So, how do we make this business plan really work for you? So, to make your plan successful, quality is going to be really important, and I always recommend that you keep your plan really short and usable. Sometimes making a business plan short can actually be harder than a long one, but it forces you to focus in on what's really important in making this business work. I also encourage any client working with me to continually iterate and improve their plan. It doesn't have to be perfect in the first draft, but get something down on paper, give it a shot, and then let's adjust and change and improve as we go. The value proposition is really important. Will people want what you have to offer? And again, this is something that the quality of this question will determine the quality of your business plan. Again, don't be afraid to iterate as you learn more about your market and continually improve the way you understand your customers and understand the value proposition that you're putting together. Really importantly, to make your business plan work, the accountability for action is really important. This is where some external support can also add some additional credibility to your plan if you've got someone outside your business giving you a push to make sure you do what you say you're going to do. A couple of final points that I'd make around making your plan successful is when we're setting goals, it's not about trying to predict the future. You're just trying to put a stake in the sand to measure whether you're on track or off track and have some early warning if you're not going where you need to go. The other recommendation to make your plan successful is I'd do the business planning before you start to invest in marketing. Often, when you put together the business logic, it can change how your marketing may need to come together. And as I touched on, I'd really recommend getting some external help and assistance to help you collect more good ideas, to offer a fresh perspective and look at your business in ways that you may not have done yourself when you're working in it, but also to hold you accountable, both for your assumptions and to make sure that you take the actions that you need to take. The style of plan you put together will really depend on who it's for. And as we talked about earlier, there's typically 3 different audiences, being banks, investors, or to keep you on track. A bank will usually want to see a reasonable amount of business logic, but the supporting evidence will be quite important to them as well, particularly in terms of how they're going to understand whether you've got the ability to repay loans even if your business plan doesn't achieve the initial targets. They're probably less interested in the action plan, but it's still important. But they're certainly going to want to see that you've considered risks fairly carefully. An investor is going to be very critical about your business logic. They're going to want to understand in detail how this business is going to work. They're going to be quite interested in the supporting evidence, and they want to make sure that you've done your homework and that what you're saying in your business logic stacks up with some numbers. They're going to want to understand the action plan that you're going to take, and they're going to want to understand if something goes wrong here, how do I get any sort of money back out of this? So risk management is really important for investors. And then if this is a business plan to keep you on track, well, of course, you're going to want to make sure that your business logic is clear. Your supporting evidence, you're probably going to have a pretty good handle on yourself anyway, so you may not need to be as rigorous in the way you document that in your plan. The action plan, however, is going to want to be really clearly spelled out, because you're going to need to be clear on who's doing what and by when, so that you can easily see if you're on track or off track. And your risk management is really important as well, to understand what are we going to do if things go wrong here. So different investors are going to want a different format in the way the plan's put together. The typical structure that I see for a bank or investor might look something like this. We have a contents page which covers executive summary, a description of your company, clearly explaining what your service offer is, some evidence around the market, a discussion around your strategy and how you're going to implement, some more evidence around your management team and the partnerships, and some good strong evidence around your financial planning and scenario projections. Importantly, those financial projections need to be quite detailed, and importantly, you'll need to explain how your cash balances are expected to move over the forecast period. If it's for your own internal purposes, it tends to look a little bit different. And here's a typical example that I help clients put together, where we really try and summarise on one page what's happening in this business. So typically I talk about strategic pillars. So what are the 3 or 4 really important strategic things we need to get right? What are the focus points? What are the measures? And what are the priorities over the next 12 months? Then I might talk about how we're going to stage our activity, because we can't do everything at once. So I typically look at 3 different time horizons, maybe with the first horizon being the next 6 months, the next horizon being perhaps 3 to 12 months, and then what's going to happen in the future. And just working out what do those activities look like for the different horizons that we're talking about. It's really important that we're disciplined in the execution habits and practices when we're working on the business rather than in the business, and that we don't try and do everything at once, and that we're clear on what is the end goal we're shooting for over the medium to long term, and how is that going to come together with the activities that we're going to be undertaking. The other thing, if we're using the business plan internally, is to be really clear on those actions, accountabilities and timings. And typically here I might look at perhaps actions over the next 90 days, and then I'd like to hold a meeting once a quarter, sometimes once a month, to work with business owners on what's the next stage of the plan and what are the next set of actions that we need to be working on. So, in summary, you need to take action when it comes to business plans, whatever the audience and whatever it's for. As I mentioned, there's 4 key things that need to come together to make a business plan successful. The first is crystal clear business logic. How is this business going to work and make money? Secondly, it's all about evidence and making sure you can back up your claims about who you're targeting, why they would want to buy from you, and how those numbers are going to work. Thirdly, we need to be clear on the actions that we're taking, who's going to do what, by when. And fourthly, have you considered your risks? Thank you for the presentation, and there'll be some more follow-up materials coming out to you around this, and I look forward to engaging with some of you in the question and answer session. Thank you.